Are you seeking fulfillment for your life? Do you want freedom from fear? That's why we're here. Welcome to Jesus 101, introducing you to the real Jesus. And now, here's your host, Elizabeth Talbot.
Welcome to Jesus 101. I'm so excited that you joined us for our series. We are in our third program in the series After God's Heart, based on David's life. And we have called it also a study in brokenness, because somehow God had chosen this shepherd boy who would become a king, and he allowed him to be broken. And today we start that part that all of us would like not to have in our lives, the in-between, between anointing and appointing. Those in-between times that you wonder, how can you have faith during those in-between times? When you're not here or there, you are just in the middle and you don't know what to do. When I was going through one of those in-between times, probably the hardest one in my life, I was given many slogans that helped me. And I used to write them all over and stick them on the walls and on my computer and the mirrors. And one of them defined what faith is. And the slogan said, faith is not leaving point A to go to point B. Faith is just leaving point A. Which is so hard when you don't know where point B is. Most of us would like to just grab the A as long as we can until we actually have our hand on B. But faith is leaving point A without always knowing what point B will be. And so David will enter in today's program. He will enter in the in-between time. When everything was going great, he killed Goliath, and he was playing his harp for Saul, and this and that, and all of a sudden the tide turns. And everything is going downhill. And I wonder how many times did he put his arms up, his hands to the heavens and said, what's going on, God? Are you sure there was the right oil in that horn that Prophet Samuel brought to me? Are you sure I was anointed king? Because it certainly doesn't feel like it. So today we're going to talk about faith during those times of in-between. And to do so, we have invited once again, Pastor Mike Tucker. Thanks for being here.
It is a joy, as always.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And talking about faith in between times or in times of pain, you have gone through quite a few things in your life.
Yeah. In fact, you would say in many respects, I'm in the in-between time now. As we are taping this, my wife passed away about 10 months ago. And so going through that first year of experience has been very difficult, of the in-between, what comes next. Before Gail died, she wrote letters to each of our children and our grandchildren. And I say wrote them. She was not able to see at the moment because the strokes had taken away her vision. And so I had to type them as she dictated. And then I would read it back, we'd edit. So I wrote a letter to both of our daughters and our son-in-law and to our two grandchildren. And after she was through with that, she said, well, I need to write one to you. I said, well, that's going to be rather difficult since I'm the one typing. I said, but, what are you going to say that you haven't said every day for 40 years anyway? She said, well, you may be right. I said, but, for sake of argument, if you were going to give me any advice, what would it be? And she thought for a moment. She said, first of all, no regrets. And she knew that my tendency would be to look back at our life together and beat myself up over things that I thought that I had done wrong. Wow. And she said, we have no regrets, either of us, in this relationship, none whatsoever.
Well, how blessed is that?
But the second one, she said, was live our life. And for us, that meant faith, family, and ministry, really in that order.
So she was saying continue to
live our life. I think that one of the things we learn in the in-between time is you continue to do the things you've been called to do, even though it may not be in that particular context, maybe not even with the person you were doing it before, and even though you're in transition, continue to do the things you've been called to do.
To do.
Until you know exactly what will be the new thing. And so I think that her advice was really poignant to me. Live our life. And so I'm still in that in-between time. There's some things that I'm trying to figure out, some things that I know will change, and some things will remain the same. But until then, I'm continuing to live our life.
Well, thanks so much for sharing. I actually have followed your process quite a bit through Facebook, and you have been very public with your grief process, and it has helped me, and it has helped countless amount of people that I have talked to say, well, this has helped me to know how to have faith during the in-between times, whether it's grief or whether you have lost a job and you don't know what's coming next, or whether you're facing a disease or an illness, or, I mean, there's countless situations in which we could say we're in between.
Yeah, the divorce is another example of that.
Yes, and I went through that, as you know.
Yeah.
I'm divorced from my first husband after many years, 15 years of marriage, and we're not going to discuss the circumstances here. I've been married now to my husband for 17 years, my second husband. But I remember the in-between. I read all kinds of books during that time. Between this and between that, I was like, okay, so what am I going to do now? And you learn a lot of things about God and brokenness during that time. And
it's amazing how much growth occurs during the in-between times, the periods of brokenness. I wish I could grow as well when things are good.
Good, isn't it
but
something?
But I don't. I never have.
Yeah, we have discussed the fact that those 13 inches that people say, and I counted them and they were less than me, 10 inches from your head to your heart, pain does this journey from your head to your heart, you know. And today we're going to face this with David. And, you know, David has been appointed king, anointed king. So here we have a crown. I'm going to push it here. And I have the horn.
Closer to me, good.
I have yeah, you're the crown, I'm the horn. So I have a friend, her name is Elisa Fall. One time, she preached a sermon that I never forgot on David, and she called it the in-between time between anointing and appointing. So she says, he has already been anointed king, right? And has not been appointed king yet. So that's the crown, not yet. So you can't wear it.
Can't wear it.
You can wear it in another program, but not yet. So here we are in between, and the truth that happens is that many of us are in between. You get called to ministry, all of a sudden you find yourself doing something
entirely different.
Yeah. Or a situation in your life, relationship-wise, or whatever it may be, and you're like, what's going on? I thought you called me for this. How come? And you know, the more I have studied the scriptures, the more I found that every person that did something for God went through an in-between time.
Yeah. Not only that, some people will pray about a decision, will make the decision, and then things go wrong, and they say, well, I thought I was doing what God wanted me to do.
Yeah.
The difficult times do not mean that God did not call you to do this.
Or that He's not with you at that moment.
Not with you.
Yeah.
Basically, the decision was good, but this is a part of the process. This is a part of what He wanted for your life.
Absolutely.
Even though it's difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to go to 1 Samuel 16, verse 11, 13 to show you where we were when we started this. So because he went back so many times to his anointing. It's like, are you sure? Is that the way it was? So we're going to read the anointing of David one more time.
Go ahead and do that.
As a context. 1 Samuel 16, verse 11. Samuel said to Jesse, are these all the children? And he said, there remains the youngest. And behold, he's tending the sheep. And Samuel said to Jesse, we're not going to, eat until he comes. And David comes from the sheep, a little boy with a harp and sheep, smelling like sheep.
Yeah, smelling like sheep, yeah.
Like Mike says. And he got anointed. Verse 13, Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the midst of his brothers, and the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon him. And the next chapter we have is 1 Samuel 17, and he's cutting the head off of the giant Goliath, and we're all cheering.
Yes.
Everything is great, and God is with us, and woohoo, right? Well, then we get chapter 18.
Yeah.
And this is when David is enlisted in God's school of brokenness. What do you think most of us don't like to be enlisted in the school of brokenness?
It's painful. I hate pain. And the school of brokenness never leaves you without having experienced the pain. Though I have learned something through the years, I go back to this most current experience of mine, which is the loss of my wife. There's so many things that you do that first year that are painful, and I used to avoid pain. But through this process, I've decided to lean into the pain because that's where my growth comes, where my healing comes. So I initiate contact with painful things, going to places we used to go to together, doing things by myself that we would do together. Knowing that this is going to bring pain, I lean into it. Let's do it. Let's
Yeah,
get
let's
it over with.
process,
Let's process it now on my terms as much as I can, rather than waiting for it to surprise me.
Yeah.
I've come to see the pain as being an important part of the healing process and the growth process, so I lean into it.
Yeah.
But that's not our natural inclination. We don't want to lean into the pain.
That's why God, I have to tell you again, this book, A Tale of Three Kings, Studying Brokenness by Gene Edwards. I highly recommend it. This book is written in a very different style than all the books you probably have read, but it tells you why it was necessary in the case of David to grow, to grow so that he wouldn't end up being like Saul. Right? And one of the best lines in the whole book is, God used Saul to kill the Saul in David.
Yeah. We all have a bit of Saul in us.
Yes. So that when David became king, he wouldn't be like Saul. So God used Saul to kill the Saul in David, and David ended up being a king in a whole different order than the order of Saul, right?
Absolutely.
Which was a spear-throwing king, right? So let's get started with that. Chapter 18 is the beginning of the pain, and we're gonna start on verse 10.
Verse 10. And it says, "And the next day, a harmful spirit from God rushed upon Saul, and he raved within his house while David was playing the lyre, and as he did day by day. Saul had his spear in his hand, and Saul hurled the spear, for he thought, I will pin David to the wall, but David evaded him twice."
Okay, so here I have, imagine you're sitting there.
You have a spear.
I have a spear.
Why am I not surprised?
My husband made the spear for me.
Well, good for him,
Yes,
but I don't like it when you point it at me.
Well, I want to point it because I want you to think. David is there playing for Saul.
Yes, playing
He's
the
minding
harp,
his own business,
Yes.
right? All of a sudden, this thing comes upon Saul, and he grabs his spear, and the Bible is very graphic on this. It says that he thought, the Hebrew says it specifically, that he could pin David
against
to
the
the
wall.
wall.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, so what's going on? I mean, didn't we settle this already? I mean, I'm working for you, I'm in the court, and you want to pin me to the wall? What's going on in your head, right? So David probably was like, what's going on? Did he go crazy? Because he will eventually go back to the court, right? And he will find the same thing again.
Yeah.
I mean, how many times do you get speared or pinned to the wall where you say, okay, this is no longer the call for me? Because I think it's very important to understand that is nothing that David has done. And I can't stress that enough, because a lot of people say, oh, if something bad is happening to you, you must have done something
You've done something.
really
Boy,
wrong.
how many times have I heard that?
Isn't it terrible?
It is terrible, and it's a bad theology.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a horrid theology.
Yes, absolutely, because
Bad things happen to good people. Bad things happen when you're minding your own business.
Exactly.
It's because of the planet on which we live.
Exactly. Now, God has the amazing ability to somehow turn it into a blessing to somebody else,
Right.
or I mean, I can't imagine how He turns death into a blessing. I mean, I can, because I lost my parents in a very short period of time, both of them. And now you can talk about this with other people who are going through it in a way that you couldn't talk about it when you went through it. But it's not that God causes any of these things, or that you are at fault, which is very important.
Yeah.
In this case, David, the whole tide turns.
David's not made any mistakes that we can see here so far.
Yeah.
He has been obedient. He's been a champion. He's done this in the name of the Lord of hosts, not taking credit for himself.
Absolutely. And all of a sudden, he finds a crazy king.
Yeah.
Now, we're going to talk a little bit about him, because this spear-throwing king, and I love that line that I told you in the book that says that God used Saul to kill the Saul in David. It says, David could for sure have grabbed the spear and throw it back.
Yeah, but he didn't.
Yeah, but that's the point, is that God was training David to be a different type of king. David was coming from battle. He knew how to use the spear.
Yeah.
He could have said, oh yeah, let me show you.
Get a
I'm
load of
younger
this. Yeah.
and I'm anointed of the Lord.
Yeah.
Right? So
My aim will be true.
Exactly.
And you're not nearly as fast as I am, buddy.
Yes, and let me remind you what I did to Goliath.
Yeah.
Right? And you are not even close to that.
And get a load of Goliath.
Exactly. So this is the point, that God was training David to be a whole different type of king. But Saul's things, he becomes suspicious first. So going back a bit, in chapter 18, verse 7 and 8 and 9, we got the beginning of these pains.
And the women sang to one another as they celebrated, Saul has struck down his thousands. and David his 10,000s. And Saul was very angry, and this saying displeased him. He said, they have ascribed to David 10,000s, and to me they have ascribed thousands. And what more can he have but the kingdom?
And look at verse 9.
And Saul eyed David from that day on.
Yes, and the eyed in my version says looked at him with suspicion.
Suspicion,
So
absolutely.
we're going to look a little bit about this reinforcing loop that Saul gets into. And I think it's helpful for all of us because sometimes there's things that happen, and if we leave our hearts unchecked, we might end up in the wrong place. You like my board?
It's a lovely board.
Yes.
And I never know what you're going to pull out from underneath the table. We don't rehearse this. I have no idea what you're doing next.
That's right. So let's say something happens, like an event happens. And so the first thing you have is feelings. So in this case, he's angry and he decides he's suspicious, right?
Right.
Well, the feeling will bring thoughts. And the thoughts in this case are, well, he's going to take over.
Yeah.
What else can he have other than the kingdom?
Yeah.
Right? The thoughts eventually give birth to behavior. So a little bit later, as we did a moment ago, out of the blue, he wants to pin him to the wall, right? Now, behavior will give way to your self-image because depending on what you do, you will feel that particular way about yourself, right? Well, then this will decide how you feel on the next event that happens.
Right.
Okay. Now, this reinforcing loop happens to all of us, to every human being, right?
Absolutely.
So you have a particular event and you're going, what was that?
Yeah.
Now, the feeling will turn into, is he trying to take over the kingdom? Then he's going to take like, I want to kill you.
That, yeah.
Well, if I try that, then I feel really bad about myself. Then Jonathan says, Dad, what are you doing? This is our friend. He's on our side.
Yeah.
Oh, I promise you, it's never going to happen again. The whole thing happens again to the point where Saul becomes a person that will want to murder David. And let's read it because sometimes people say, how did that person become a rapist or become a whatever? This is a process.
It is a process.
Nobody wakes up one...
nothing happens in a vacuum.
Yeah.
Something, you don't wake up one day and say, I think I'll kill somebody.
Yeah,
You know?
absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's important to remember that.
Yeah.
So verse 12 tells us another feeling, not just suspicion now.
Saul was afraid of David because the Lord was with him, but had departed from Saul.
So now we have a different feeling. Not only is he just suspicious, he's afraid of David because he sees that not only is he very victorious in the army and all of that, but God is with him. And God is not with Saul.
Yeah, the reason for that is Saul has given way to this whole cycle, right?
For a while.
He had allowed it to continue to be a downward spiral. The truth is you can't control the events. You don't even control the feelings. The feelings are not good or bad, they're just feelings, they just come. The thing that you can first control is the thoughts. David turned his thoughts away from the problem, away from anybody else, away from himself. David turned his thoughts back to the solution, and that is God himself. Saul turned his thoughts on himself, his reputation, his pride, his kingdom, and then that produced the behavior, which produced the self-image, and then it became a downward spiral. If you can stop it with the thoughts, the one thing you can control by God's grace, you change the spiral.
Yeah, and that's the one choice you were talking about later, earlier.
Yeah, the one choice away from a happier life, a better life.
Yes, and the choice happens right here.
Right, with your thoughts.
And so then after that, this is verse 16, that all of Israel and Judah loved David, and so Saul was a little afraid of them too. And it says on verse 14 that David was prospering because
the Spirit of the Lord within.
So then finally Saul says, okay, fine, I'm going to make peace with you. I'm going to give you my daughter as a wife. Because one of his daughters was in love with David. But look at the motives. Verse 20 and 21 of 1 Samuel 18. We continue on the same chapter.
Now Saul's daughter Michal loved David, and they told Saul and the king, Saul and the thing pleased him. Saul thought, let me give her to him that she may be a snare for him.
So I'm going to give you my daughter But it's not because I'm really happy
No.
that you're going to be my
She'll
son-in-law.
snare you, yeah.
I hope she becomes a snare to you and makes your life impossible, and she's going to be on my side.
Yeah.
Right? Well,
you think one of those two things. Either she's going to be the stooge inside giving you information, or he knows her character so well, she's going to drive him nuts.
something that would happen like with me?
Well, Patrick is a saint. I love the man, and I respect him so much because of what the man endures.
Yeah. Can you imagine?
17 years of marriage.
Yeah, that's it.
The man's ready for sainthood.
Yeah, he sure is.
Okay.
That I can give you. So she, on the other hand, helps David escape.
Right.
And Saul will become very upset with his daughter, saying, I hope that you were on my side.
Yeah.
How come, Eventually, Saul decides, okay, I'm going to put him in the front of the battle.
Yeah.
He asks for the foreskin of 100 Philistines. David goes out, and verse 27 to 29 happens.
And David arose, went along with his men, and killed 2,000 of the Philistines.
No, 200.
Well, so you're right, 200. Well, 2,000 was a better number. But the Bible says 200.
The point was greater.
So we'll go with 200
Okay.
of the Philistines. And David brought their foreskins, which were given in full number to the king, that he might become the king's son-in-law.
Yes.
And Saul gave him his daughter, Michal, for a wife.
Yeah, look at verse 29.
And verse 29, Saul was even more afraid of David.
Yeah.
So Saul was David's enemy continually.
And everything that happened, it was more and more suspicion, afraid. Let's kill him. Let's put him. He asked for 100 Philistines. David brings back 200.
Yeah.
And
Thought for sure that would kill him.
Yeah.
But it didn't.
It didn't.
Yeah.
So, but David is like, what's going on?
Yeah.
So the in-between time is just starting. And in chapter 19, David starts running from Saul. He escapes. And the next program is going to be all the time in the Engedi Desert and the caves. The cave time, the in-between time, it is a time of growth, but it's also a time in which you question, what is going on? Did God abandon me? Did the anointing work or it didn't work? Because when you are between anointing and appointing, and the statistics tell us that in any particular audience, more than 50% will say that they are in the in-between time.
At any given time.
At any given time.
Any given time.
They're going to say,
Yes.
I don't know what's going on. I'm from here to there, and I don't know what's happening.
A cue for preaching is if you will always preach to people's pain, you will always hit the mark.
Wow.
Because someone in your audience, in fact, over half of them are going to be experiencing pain.
Yeah.
So if you preach to a point of pain and God's solution for that pain, you will always hit the mark with your sermon.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, in the case of David, he will spend a long time now in the caves and running away and being persecuted. We have called this program Mistreated because before that it was all victory. All of a sudden he started getting mistreated of no bad of his own that he could say, okay, I did something wrong, right? So if you are right now in something like that, don't listen to those friends that always try to say, like the friends of Job.
Job, yeah. So what have you been up to that you're not telling us about?
Exactly, because if God was with you, then
because this wouldn't be happening otherwise.
And one of the amazing things here is that it keeps saying the Lord was with him.
Yeah.
So that's why
even during the time he's being mistreated, even during the time when he's running,
that's right.
The Lord was with him.
And this is one of those things that I think if you are in between time, don't forget, God does not abandon you. He has not abandoned you.
No.
He is with you during the in-between times. The only reason why we can have faith in the in-between times is because we know God says, I will never leave you nor forsake you. And so he starts running. And I want to tell you something that I think is very interesting. When he runs away, and we are now on chapter 21, he's in the middle of nowhere, and he has nothing to eat for his men and himself and all of us. And then he goes to see Ahimelech. Is that how you say it?
Yeah.
Ahimelech, the priest. And he has even a sword. David had to escape so fast that he doesn't even have something to fight with. And I think God does something for him because the priest says, I have no swords. What am I going to have here? Except one. I have one. So we're in 1 Samuel chapter 21, and I think God did this for David just to remind him who he was and where he has come from. So we're in 1 Samuel chapter 21. We're going to do verse 9 and 10.
And the priest said, the sword of Goliath, the Philistine, whom you struck down in the valley of Elah, behold, it is here wrapped with a cloth behind the ephod. If you will take that, take it. For there is none but that here. And David said, there is none like that. Give it to me.
Yeah. So I think that, and from there on, he went to Achish, king of Gath. He went to find refuge in Gath, where Goliath had come from.
Yeah, from Gath.
Yeah, so all this area.
It's interesting that the place you would find refuge is the place where the guy you killed came from.
Yes.
Because you're running away from this king.
Isn't it something?
Yeah.
And I think it's a merciful act of God that the sword that will be given to him is the one of Goliath, which he remembers very well.
Yes.
That God gave him that victory. Like saying, God is still with you. And some people see it because he's going to eat some of the bread of the presence there. Some people see, some scholars see that even that, the bread of the presence is saying, God is with you.
Yeah.
He's present with you, so don't forget who you are. Yeah.
God does that for us at times. I got an email this morning. I'm in the in-between time. Someone has been watching my sermons, listening to my teaching, reading my books, and telling me what that has meant to them.
Wow.
And it reminded me of the core of my ministry, what it's been about, and the fact that, yeah, God has been with me in the past, because here's an example of that, of someone whose life has been blessed by the ministry. So even in the in-between times, like he did for David, he reminds you of the Goliath sword in your own life.
That's fantastic. I brought some walnuts for a reason, and not just because I'm hungry. Some time ago, I was very blessed by a poet that is an ancient poet. Somebody in the book, somebody asked him, what is pain? And he answers and says, pain is the cracking of the shell that encompasses our understanding. It was so deep to me that I visualized this. I mean, if I want to eat this walnut, I have to break it first.
Yes.
And then I'm going to get the awesome walnut.
Yeah.
And I'm going, so this is the way God has to act with us sometimes. Like I said, he's not necessarily doing this, but he'll use the breaking for us to grow, for us to be able to bless other people, because pain is very often the breaking of the shell that encompasses our understanding.
And the understanding goes back to the thoughts. You know, we talked about this cycle, changing the thoughts, and it's a deeper insight to God, an insight to His character, our understanding that begins to change everything for us.
Yes. Thank you so much for being with us.
Absolutely.
You're always so insightful, and thanks for sharing of your pain as well. Thank you for being here. And we go back to the cross, where we always need to be. You know, Jesus faced something very similar to David. You know that Jesus would be a descendant of David later on, but it's striking some of the parallelism of David's life and Jesus. Jesus faced a crazy person in heaven. His name was Lucifer, who became so jealous of him that all of sin and the whole conflict between good and evil started because the same spirit that was in Saul was in Lucifer, saying, how come? He's the Son of God. I am okay too. And Jesus had to give himself up. And he was in an in-between time here on this earth, because he came as a human being to be able to do for us what we could not do for ourselves. Now he's in heaven, and he's coming soon for us. So don't forget, if you are in between, God promises, I am with you.